The morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, painting golden lines across Amira's kitchen table. She sat with her coffee, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. 4 years, her mornings had looked the same. Calm, predictable, peaceful. Her phone rang, breaking the silence. Saturday evening arrived wrapped in gold light and city noise. Cars glided past glowing shop windows as Amira's taxi pulled up to La Riviere. The marble entrance shimmered beneath a canopy of crystal lights, and a valet in a crisp uniform opened her door as if welcoming royalty. Amira stepped out slowly, smoothing the simple navy blue dress she'd chosen. Her heels were worn but clean, her hair pinned neatly. For a moment, she watched couples in glittering outfits glide through the doors, laughter spilling behind them like perfume. She took a quiet breath. "You belong anywhere your heart is kind," she reminded herself. Inside, the restaurant sparkled. Chandeliers hung like frozen rain, and violins played softly over the murmur of wealthy conversation. Waiters moved with practiced grace, carrying silver trays and wine that cost more than her month's groceries. Near the corner table, she spotted Ethan. He looked sharp in a tailored suit, his tie perfectly knotted, far from the boy who once fixed his bike in their small yard. Sophia sat beside him, elegant and composed, her diamond earrings catching the light. Across from them, 2 strangers smiled with poised superiority. Veronica and Richard Lark. Ethan stood quickly. "Mom, you made it." He kissed her cheek nervously, avoiding eye contact. "Of course, dear," she said softly. "I wouldn't miss it." Veronica's eyes scanned Amira's dress with a polite but piercing glance. "You must be Amira," she said, her smile sharp at the edges. "So wonderful to finally meet you." "Likewise," Amira replied. Richard nodded briefly. "A pleasure," he said, his tone courteous yet detached, the kind of politeness reserved for waiters and strangers. As Amira sat, she noticed how conversation shifted like water avoiding a stone. Veronica spoke about art galleries, resorts, and meaningful investments. Sophia chimed in occasionally. Ethan stayed mostly quiet, fiddling with his glass. When the waiter handed Amira a menu, the elegant French names blurred together. Veronica leaned forward. "Oh, don't worry, dear," she said sweetly. "The salad here is lovely, very simple." Amira smiled faintly. "Simple suits me." The faintest flicker of amusement passed over Veronica's face. Ethan pretended not to see it. Amira folded her napkin on her lap, steady and graceful. Around her, the chandeliers glittered, the laughter glowed, and judgment flowed as quietly as wine. She said nothing, but she saw everything. The dinner had begun, and so had her silent lesson. The plates arrived like sculptures, small, perfect, expensive. The silverware gleamed beneath the chandelier light, and every detail in La Riviere seemed designed to remind guests of their place in the world. Amira sat straight, her hands folded neatly, while Veronica dominated the conversation. Her voice was polished, her laugh deliberate, the kind of sound that expected admiration. "Oh, we've just returned from Italy," Veronica said, swirling her wine. "We have a little villa near Lake Como. It's so hard to find staff who understand what quality truly means these days." Richard chuckled, adding, "You'd be surprised how few people know real class when they see it." Amira smiled gently. "Class isn't something you see," she said softly. "It's something you feel." Veronica blinked, then laughed lightly. "How poetic," she replied, the word dripping with condescension. "You must find all this," she gestured around the grand dining room, "a bit much." Amira met her gaze. "It's beautiful," she said. "But beauty is everywhere if you're looking." Sophia shifted in her seat, uncomfortable. Ethan took a sip of water, pretending not to notice the tension forming like a storm cloud above the table. Veronica leaned in, her smile tightening. "So tell us, Amira," she said. "What do you do?" Amira hesitated for a moment, not from shame, but from understanding exactly where this was headed. "I work with documents," she replied calmly. Veronica tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Documents," she repeated. "Oh, a clerk." Her soft laugh filled the air, joined by Richard's polite chuckle. Even the waiter paused, sensing the shift. Ethan's fork clattered slightly against his plate, his face pale. Sophia looked down, guilt flickering in her eyes. Amira took a slow sip of water, her expression untouched. "Something like that," she said, voice smooth as glass. Veronica nodded, clearly satisfied. "It's good to be useful, isn't it? The world needs all kinds." Amira's lips curved in a faint smile. "It does," she agreed. "Some people work with their hands. Others, with their hearts." The remark passed so gently that it took a moment for the sting to register. Veronica blinked, unsure whether she'd been insulted or enlightened. Amira didn't flinch, didn't frown. She only looked around the glittering room, the perfect stage for pride to embarrass itself. The dinner continued, but Amira had already seen what she came to see. The dinner plates were cleared, leaving behind the faint aroma of truffle and regret. Conversation slowed to small talk and shallow smiles. The waiter poured the last of the wine, bowed politely, and disappeared, leaving the four of them alone in the golden hush of the restaurant. Veronica leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with practiced grace. Her diamonds caught the chandelier's light as she looked at Amira with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well," she began, her tone as smooth as the wine she sipped, "it's been such a pleasure to meet you, Amira. You seem like such a simple woman." Amira nodded politely. "Thank you. I try to keep life simple. It's easier to appreciate the small blessings." Veronica's smile stiffened. "Of course," she said, voice dripping with false sweetness. Then she reached into her designer purse and pulled out a small white envelope. Her manicured fingers tapped it twice against the table before she slid it toward Amira. "What's this?" Amira asked softly, though she already knew. "Just a little something," Veronica said. "A small gift, to help you take care of yourself. I know things can be difficult on your own." Ethan's eyes widened. "Mom," he started, but his voice faltered. He glanced at Sophia, who looked mortified, her forced smile trembling at the edges. Amira stared at the envelope. It lay on the white linen like a wound that refused to hide. The room felt suddenly smaller, quieter. She could feel the humiliation pressing against her chest, not from the money, but from what it implied. They thought she was weak, needy, a charity case. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached out, but not from anger. From restraint. She smiled faintly. "You're too generous," she said. Her voice was calm, disarmingly calm. Veronica relaxed, mistaking dignity for gratitude. "Think nothing of it, dear. We're family now. We just want to help." Amira slipped the envelope into her purse without a glance. "Then I'll be sure to put it to good use," she said quietly. Veronica nodded, satisfied. Ethan stayed silent, his shame visible. When Amira stood to leave, she turned once more toward Veronica. "Thank you for dinner," she said gently. "It was enlightening." Outside, the night air was cool, steadying. Amira exhaled slowly, her lips curving into the faintest smile. They thought they'd bought her silence. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. A week passed since the dinner that Amira couldn't forget, not because of the insult, but because of the silence that followed. Ethan hadn't called for days. When he finally did, his voice sounded stiff, almost rehearsed. "Mom," he began carefully, "Sophia's parents, they'd like to visit your place. Just to see where I grew up." Amira smiled faintly, her tone even. "Of course. Tell them they're welcome anytime." When she hung up, she stood in her sunlit living room, her eyes drifting over the space she had built piece by piece. The house was elegant, modern yet warm, filled with quiet achievements, not extravagance. Every photo, every framed certificate on the wall told her story. From nothing to something, from struggle to stability. Saturday arrived bright and cloudless. A sleek black car stopped in front of her driveway, the kind that barely made a sound when the doors closed. Veronica stepped out first, wearing sunglasses too large for her face. Richard followed, checking his watch as if punctuality could hide discomfort. Ethan and Sophia came last, exchanging uneasy glances. When Amira opened the front door, Sunlight spilled behind her like a halo. "Welcome," she said softly. Veronica blinked. Her words stumbled. This is your house?" "Yes," Amira replied with a calm smile. "Please, come in." They stepped inside, their expensive shoes clicking against marble floors. The living room was spacious, lined with soft gold and cream tones. Shelves held framed photos of Ethan's childhood, graduation, birthdays, small moments frozen in time. On one wall hung a cluster of awards and certificates, each neatly aligned. Veronica stopped mid-step, her eyes locking on a brass plaque. Amira Khan, Regional Director, Northwest Investments. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Richard stood behind her, suddenly unsure of his posture. Sophia exhaled softly. Ethan lowered his gaze, torn between pride and shame. Amira set down a tray of tea. "You wanted to see my apartment," she said, her tone light, almost playful. "I hope it's not too small for your liking." Veronica's cheeks flushed. "No, it's lovely," she murmured, the word catching in her throat. Amira smiled gently, pouring tea as if nothing had happened. "It's just home," she said. Simple but full. In the quiet that followed, no one dared to speak. The truth needed no voice. It filled the room all on its own. The clink of teacups broke the silence that had fallen like a curtain. The scent of jasmine filled Amira's living room, softening the sharp edges of awkwardness. Across from her sat Veronica and Richard, suddenly smaller than their reputation. Sophia and Ethan sat quietly, their faces carrying the weight of unspoken truth. Amira poured tea with steady hands, her movements slow and deliberate, a rhythm born from years of patience. "It's strange," she said finally, her voice warm but firm. "People see a calm life and think it was always that way." Veronica looked up, startled by the gentleness in her tone. "I'm sure you've worked hard," she offered lightly, as if to patch a wound she didn't understand. Amira smiled. "Hard. Yes. But that word doesn't quite cover it." She set her cup down and leaned back, her eyes distant but steady. "After my husband passed, Ethan was 10. We had nothing, not savings, not security. I worked days in an office sorting files, nights at a grocery store, and weekends cleaning houses. 4 years, every coin had a purpose. Rent, food, tuition. I told Ethan we'd be okay, even when I wasn't sure myself." Ethan lowered his head. His mother's words took him back to nights when she came home too tired to eat, yet still smiled at him as if exhaustion didn't exist. "I didn't climb," she continued softly. "I built, inch by inch, mistake by mistake. And eventually, the company I used to file papers for trusted me with real numbers. Then with people. One day, I was the one signing the checks." Veronica's teacup shook slightly as she placed it down. "You never mentioned this before," she murmured. Amira's lips curved. "You never asked." The words hung in the air, not cruel, just true. She looked directly at Veronica. "That night at the restaurant, I stayed quiet because I wanted to know something. Whether the people who talk of class and culture could recognize either without a price tag attached." Richard cleared his throat. "Mrs. Amira, I owe you an apology." Veronica forced a thin smile. "We all misjudge sometimes." Amira nodded. "We do. But what matters is what we learn afterward." No one spoke after that. Only the clock ticked, steady, forgiving. And for the first time, silence felt honest. The house was silent after everyone left. The faint scent of tea still lingered in the air, mixing with the soft hum of the city beyond the windows. Amira moved slowly, gathering the empty cups from the table, her thoughts calm but heavy. The evening had ended with civility, but she knew it had stirred something deeper, especially in Ethan. She heard his footsteps behind her before he spoke. "Mom!" His voice trembled. No longer the confident tone of a grown man, but the uncertain whisper of the boy she'd once comforted through storms and nightmares. Amira turned, her eyes gentle. "Yes, son." He stood there, shoulders hunched, his eyes wet. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For tonight. For that dinner." For everything. Amira tilted her head, waiting. She had learned that sometimes silence invited truth better than words. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his voice breaking. I was ashamed. Not of you, but of how simple things were. I thought if I could make them think we came from something grand, they'd accept me more easily. I thought pretending would make it easier. Amira's heart ached, but her face remained calm. She set the teacup down and crossed the room, placing a hand on his shoulder. Ethan, she said softly, pretending always costs more than truth. He met her gaze, tears spilling freely now. You were right, Mom. I should have known better. You gave me everything, everything I have, everything I am, and I let them make me feel like it wasn't enough. Amira smiled, her hand brushing his cheek, the way she used to when he was small. You're not the first to forget where you came from, she said. But you're one of the few brave enough to remember. Ethan shook his head, his voice cracking. I don't deserve your forgiveness. You already have it, she whispered. Because love doesn't keep score. For a moment, they stood there in silence, mother and son, the years of struggle and distance melting into one simple truth. Love built without pride is the only kind that lasts. Amira pulled him into her arms. You're my greatest success, Ethan. Not your job. Not your house. You. Outside, the wind rustled softly against the glass. Inside, a broken bond quietly healed. And for the first time in years, Ethan called her not just mom, but home. It was a quiet Thursday morning when Amira heard the gentle knock on her door. She wasn't expecting anyone. The world outside her window felt calm and ordinary. But when she opened the door, there stood Sophia, her eyes red and glistening, a soft tremor in her voice. Mrs. Amira, she whispered. May I come in? Amira's surprise melted into calm understanding. Of course, she said, stepping aside. Sophia entered hesitantly, her polished grace replaced by something raw and unguarded. Gone were the high heels, the luxury handbag, the practiced smile. She looked smaller somehow, not by stature, but by the weight of her own realization. They sat at the same table where, just days before, Veronica and Richard had sipped tea and swallowed guilt. The silence between them stretched, not cold, but heavy with emotion waiting to be spoken. Finally, Sophia broke it. I came to say I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. That night at the restaurant, I saw how my parents treated you, and I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, but really, I was afraid to stand against them. Amira folded her hands gently, her eyes kind but unwavering. Fear makes cowards of even the best people, Sophia. The important thing is what you do after the fear passes. Sophia nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. My parents taught me to value people by their money, their status, their homes, and I believe them. But you, her voice cracked, you showed me what real grace looks like. You didn't fight back. You didn't need to. You let truth speak for you. Amira's gaze softened further. True class, she said quietly, is invisible until it's tested. The moment you lose kindness, you lose everything worth keeping. Sophia lowered her head, humbled. I want to do better, she said. For Ethan. For us. For you. Amira reached out, her hand resting gently over Sophia's. Then start there, she said. Build your home not on wealth, but on respect. That's what lasts. Sophia looked up, her tears now replaced by a faint, genuine smile. Thank you, she whispered. Amira returned the smile, a warmth glowing in her eyes. Welcome to the family, my dear. Truly this time. And in that small living room, something rare bloomed. Forgiveness turning into friendship, pride into peace. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 9, The Lesson of Dignity, 400 to 500 words, in the same cinematic, emotional tone? Here's a 400-word rendering of Chapter 8, The Daughter-in-Law's Awakening, written in the same cinematic, emotionally layered style. A soft knock echoed through Amira's hallway late that afternoon. She wiped her hands on a towel and opened the door to find Sophia standing on the porch, eyes swollen, a trembling apology already forming on her lips. Mrs. Amira, she said quietly, I hope I'm not intruding. Not at all, Amira replied, stepping aside. Come in. Sophia crossed the threshold as if stepping into confession. The polished calm she wore like armor was gone. In its place was a young woman stripped of pride. She clasped her hands together, unsure what to do with them. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, dust motes drifting like small, forgiving ghosts. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Sophia exhaled. I owe you an apology, she said. At the restaurant, I watched my parents belittle you. I didn't stop them. I told myself it wasn't my place, but the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid they'd turn on me. Her voice cracked. My parents taught me that money measures worth. I believed them. Amira's eyes softened, but she said nothing. Sophia continued, tears sliding freely now. But when I came here and saw who you are, your home, your kindness, I realized how small that thinking is. You showed grace when most people would have shown anger. Amira leaned forward, her tone calm and steady. Grace isn't weakness, Sophia. It's strength under control. True class is invisible until it's tested. Sophia nodded, the words landing deep. I want to be better than what they taught me, she whispered. For Ethan. For us. For myself. Amira reached across the table, resting her hand lightly over Sophia's trembling one. Then begin by seeing people, not possessions. When respect lives in a home, love follows. Sophia smiled through her tears, a fragile but genuine curve of the lips. Thank you for not judging me. I've lived long enough to know everyone learns their lessons differently, Amira said gently. I'm just glad you learned yours before it cost you something you can't replace. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of rain. Inside, two women, once divided by pride, sat together in quiet understanding. The room felt warmer somehow, not from the sunlight, but from the birth of respect that would no longer need apology. Months slipped by like pages turning in a quiet book. The tension of that fateful dinner had faded into memory, but time, as always, had its own sense of justice. Sophia and Ethan built a gentler rhythm together. Dinners filled with laughter, visits with Amira, and the growing peace that comes from truth finally spoken. But far away, another household began to crumble. The Larks, Veronica and Richard, had always stood on foundations of gold. Their lives revolved around luxury, their pride tied to numbers in accounts and the shine of social status. But one spring morning, that illusion cracked. A poor investment, a partner's betrayal, and within weeks, everything began to unravel. The news reached Amira's desk in a quiet, professional email. As regional director of Northwest Investments, she reviewed the client file without emotion, until she saw the names. Veronica and Richard Lark. For a moment, she simply stared at the screen, her mind replaying that humiliating dinner, the soft laughter, the envelope, the look of pity on Veronica's face. Fate had a strange sense of timing. Her assistant knocked softly. Ma'am, should I assign the case to another branch? Amira shook her head. No, she said calmly. We'll handle it here. Days turned into weeks. Amira oversaw their file personally, ensuring that every number was corrected, every mistake resolved. She could have exposed them. She could have let them lose everything. But she didn't. She adjusted portfolios quietly, guided her team discreetly, and made sure their losses were softened, never knowing who had saved them. One evening, as the office lights dimmed, her assistant returned with a letter. They've sent a note of gratitude, she said, handing it over. Amira smiled faintly but didn't open it. Let them keep their pride, she murmured. That's all they have left. She placed the letter on her desk, next to a small framed photo of Ethan and Sophia, smiling, whole, healed. Outside, the city lights flickered like a constellation of stories, each one about rise and fall, kindness and consequence. Amira leaned back in her chair, her reflection mirrored in the glass wall behind her. She hadn't needed revenge. She'd already won, in silence, in grace, in dignity. And that, she thought, was the truest form of wealth. A full year had passed since that unforgettable evening at La Riviere. Seasons had turned, time had softened old wounds, and in its quiet way, Truth had settled everything that pride once distorted. Amira stood in her kitchen, setting the table for dinner. The warm scent of rosemary chicken and baked bread filled the air, drifting through open windows. Laughter echoed faintly from the living room. Ethan and Sophia were helping set the glasses, while baby pictures and framed awards watched silently from the walls. This time, it wasn't just a family gathering, it was reconciliation. When the doorbell rang, Amira opened it to find Veronica and Richard standing on the porch. No jewels, no show of wealth, just plain clothes and hesitant smiles. For the first time, their eyes met hers not with superiority, but with sincerity. "Mrs. Amira," Richard said softly, "thank you for having us." "Your family," she replied simply, stepping aside. They joined the table, the air alive with the gentle hum of conversation and forgiveness. The laughter wasn't forced, it flowed easily, naturally. The bitterness of the past had melted into something gentler, respect. When the plates were full and the wine was poured, Sophia stood, glass in hand. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "To the woman," she began, "who taught us all that wealth isn't about what's in your account, it's about what's in your heart." Veronica looked up, her eyes glistening. Richard nodded silently beside her. Sophia smiled through emotion. "To Amira, for her grace, her strength, and for reminding us what real class looks like." Glasses clinked, and for a long moment, the room felt sacred, filled with warmth, humility, and hard-earned understanding. Amira lifted her glass last, her smile soft, her voice calm. "To family," she said, "and to lessons learned the right way." As laughter resumed, her eyes drifted to the far wall, where a single white envelope hung in a small golden frame. The same envelope Veronica had once offered her at that dinner, untouched, unopened. It wasn't a trophy. It was a reminder, of restraint, of quiet power, of how far they had all come. Amira's gaze softened as she thought. It turned out, I never needed to act poor to see who was truly rich. And with that thought, she smiled. Peaceful, complete, and free.